Sweep the side alley until it's spotless? You got it, boss. A couple of summers ago, I took a part-time job as a server at a local pub restaurant. I had a full-time job, so this was just for experience and to pick up some tip money on the side. The pub had been closed for a few years after the old owner couldn't afford it anymore. So when the new owners picked it up and got it ready for opening again, the town was pretty excited. It's a bit of a town landmark, right in the middle of our main street. I applied as soon as I found out, and ended up getting hired. I was one of the younger servers, alongside a few older ones. Most of us were women, and the older servers really looked out for us inexperienced ones. Overall, the others on the team were really nice, save for a couple of nasty ones. My new boss, Gary, not his actual name, was, well, not as great. Gary's favorite saying was, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean. He thought if we took even a second to catch our breaths, he was losing money from us, slacking off. On slow days, he would find menial, pointless tasks for us to complete. Wipe the bar counter, even though it's been wiped 3x in the past half hour already. Reorganize the menus, even though they're already perfectly organized. Fill up more condiment cups, even though there's already 50 salsa cups ready to go. Stuff like that. The most tedious task, especially in the early months of the summer, was sweeping the side alley that leads to the patio. There were these massive maple trees along the path, and they would drop leaves and seeds like crazy, especially on windy days. One afternoon in early June, there were only a handful of us working. It gets slow, and I get assigned the sweeping task. I sweep up the back alleyway as much as I can, but the wind is blowing and the trees just keep dumping more and more seeds onto the path. I do my best, until a coworker calls me back inside to help serve tables. She didn't want me missing out on tips. Bless her. I seat the table, get their orders, and start entering them in. Just then, Gary storms up to me. Gary, what are you doing? Quote, me, entering table 15's order. Why? Quote, Gary, the side alley is a mess. I don't pay you to slack off. Me, I swept up as much as I could before this table walked in. It's a really windy day. That's why it keeps getting full of leaves and seeds. You're more than welcome to check the compost bin for how much I actually did sweep up. Gary, no. We don't finish things halfway here. You're going back out there and finishing your job. I want it to be spotless. Linda, not her real name, can take table 15. Gary then switched table 15 from my account to Linda, an older server's account. Linda and I got along great. She worked as both a server and a bartender, and used to be a general manager with another restaurant chain. She decided to join this team after her retirement as a part-time hobby. She taught me a whole lot while I worked there, and I'm grateful to have met her. Linda, I'll hang on to your share of the tips. Best not to make Gary angry. Me, he really wants me to make it spotless. Does he know how impossible that is? I'd have to be out there all shift. That's when Linda gave me a smile, and the light bulb turned on in my head. I still had 2 hours left in my shift, and it was going to be right into dinner rush. I grabbed the broom and dustpan, and got to work. I would sweep as much as I could, but every so often, another strong breeze would come by and hundreds more helicopter seeds would flutter to the ground. I kept going. At this point, it started to get busier. A lineup soon began to form out the door. Linda was taking care of tables, but very soon it became clear that the other servers needed someone else to deal with everyone. Linda let them know what was up, and most of them, who tolerated Gary at best and hated him at worst, Understood. I kept on sweeping. Like Sisyphus and the boulder. The task was never ending. I scooped up pile after pile after pile of leaves and seeds. To no avail. After 45 minutes or so, the side door opened suddenly, to reveal a red-faced Gary. "Gary, why aren't you in there serving customers?" Quote. Me. Gestures at the alleyway. As if the gods themselves had heard the malicious compliance brewing. Another strong breeze shook more seeds onto the partially cleared alley, right in front of Gary's face. The look on his face was priceless. He told me, in a quieter voice, to get back inside and start taking orders. I handed the broom off to him, and he began to sweep, and sweep, and sweep. The other servers and I had a good laugh about it inside. And I managed to make decent tips that night. Gary realized he couldn't exactly fire me for following his orders perfectly, and ended up being more relaxed about the side alley. No one really cares about some leaves in seeds on the ground, so long as they're not obstructing anyone. I ended up working there for the rest of the summer before quitting. I hear the pub had to be passed on to new owners after Gary's disorganization got the better of him. My next shift, I found a broken broom in the garbage. I'd like to think it was the work of Gary. Red in the face and exhausted from battling against Mother Nature. You can still hear Gary sweeping if you listen when the wind blows. Good read lol. The restaurant industry is full of fucking Garys. They are the reason for so much staff turnover. People don't quit jobs. They quit bosses. I've learned that in these kinds of jobs, one thing that you should do is constantly identify menial tasks that could be done, even if they don't need to be done with any urgency. Pick your favorites and get stuck into them. But not so quick you finish them too quick. I remember one job in a warehouse. I screwed up and finished picking too soon. But the managers regularly asked people with nothing better to do to help with getting roller cages at the end of the aisles. So I grabbed one, walked from one end of the warehouse to the other, turned around and walked back. I must have walked the same cage back and forth over a dozen times to close out my shift. The kicker though was at the team huddle at the start of the next shift. The manager actually highlighted what I was doing, or rather, what it looked like I was doing, and actually praised me for it. So, remember kids, if you keep yourself busy, your manager will probably leave you alone, unless they think their task for you is more important. Pure gold. Nothing worse than a manager who won't listen to their staff. 9 times out of 10 the manager will be bitten in the ass because of it. I had a supervisor like that. Thankfully I only worked with her 1 or 2 days of my 2-week rotation. I always knew when she was coming around because you would suddenly hear the whispers starting from the end of the hall of coworkers passing the information, "Look busy. Jesus is coming." And to this day, when the trees are at their fullest and the wind is picking up, you could hear the sound of Gary sweeping. Best get busy as soon as you hear Gary. Because when you hear the sound of sweeping beside you, Gary's there to kill you for being a lazy bum. This is how scary cautionary tales for the town children come into existence. Lol. At least did he continued the fight himself. This story reminds me of when I was in NYC Times Square New Year's Day. So Street was littered with confetti, broken glass, etc. There was street sweepers out pushing the confetti back onto the street from the sidewalk. Not sure why. Anyways, it was so windy confetti kept blowing back. Then the icing on the cake was the street sweeper vehicle drives by and then sweeps all of the Confetti right back onto the sidewalk. Cause of the wind. I couldn't stop laughing. And the wind cries, Gary. If you're in the US and you're making wait staff min wage. The correct response to this was that Gary doesn't pay you. Your tipping customers do. If Gary wants you to do work that is not directly related to earning tips from customers, then he needs to pay you at least regular minimum wage. So when he says, I don't pay you to slack off, your response should be, you don't pay me. And then the wind changed. I'm actually surprised that he seemed to understand he'd made a mistake. I've known other managers who would have just kept yelling like it's all your fault. When I was a waiter, I refused to clean anything but my tables. Fire me if you want, but I'm not cleaning a restaurant for $2.50 an hour. If I live off tips, then my job at a restaurant involves anything that directly leads to me getting tips. But what about those pesky leaves, boss? Gary sounds like a sap. He was probably ex-military. I spent 7 years and know how petty they can be. If you have time to lean, you have time to clean. Translation. If you're good at your job, I'll punish you. So work as slowly and inefficiently as possible. Was this a job where you got paid less than $3 before tips? And he expect that? Pretty low-key MC, but surprisingly satisfying. Rod Serling himself couldn't have written it better. This is really well written. Nice post smiley face.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Ericast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.